Welcome back into day 2 here of Training Camp Report presented by Advent Health. Casey Phillips here with senior writer and editor Scott Smith, and we had, technically it's day 3 of camp for the guys, day 2 of the fans getting to be out there and our show happening, and so that means for us we kind of have our first chance to recap what happened the day before that some fans saw, and also there's a little bit of roster news, which is always a fun thing this time of year. That's what's going to happen between now and when you get that roster finalized, a lot of guys in and making some adjustments. So tell me some of the things that happened since yesterday, both in terms of the roster moves and just some things that stood out to you about camp.
Well, we have 2 new additions to the offensive line group. One is a guard named Michael Jordan. Most recently, he started 11 games for the Patriots last year at left guard. He's started 40 games, so he has a good amount of experience, which is important to add to a team that behind the starters is generally pretty inexperienced. And then a tackle named Tyler McClellan. Now, he signed with the Chargers last year as an undrafted free agent out of Campbell University. I had to look it up. That's in North Carolina. The Fighting Camels, believe it or not. And he's 6'8" and 355 pounds. So, you know, you can't
grief.
You can't teach size.
No, you cannot.
He got hurt early in training, or actually late in the preseason last year with the Chargers, and ended up on injured reserve. So he doesn't have any NFL regular season experience yet, but obviously the Bucs saw something they thought they could develop. And this isn't just all about the fact that Tristan Wirfs is out. You got to remember we also started camp with Silas Janzi and Suo Opeta on the PUP list. And by the way, Silas Janzi was waived yesterday as part of these moves as well. And Garrett Greenfield, another reserve tackle, retired after the first day of camp. So there was need for depth there, just the numbers you want to have in training camp. I don't think this necessarily means the Buccaneers are done addressing the fact that they don't have a lot of experienced depth behind Charlie Heck while Tristan Wirfs is out. There could be more moves coming.
That would be interesting to see. And I mean, look, I know this joke is probably so old, but the fact that his name is Michael Jordan and then he's also a guard.
Yes.
That's phenomenal. I have to at least acknowledge.
He's an Ohio State guy.
Yeah, I know. When you said the other guy's North Carolina, I'm like, ah, dang. Like,
Yeah,
wish it was
right?
the Michael Jordan guy.
Great.
So that's some of our roster moves that happened since yesterday. But also now, of course, we had practice to watch. And what stood out to you about some of the different plays that were made or people who stood out?
Yeah, one of the guys that really flashed was Chris Braswell, the second-year outside linebacker. Buccaneers took him in the second round last year, so obviously they expect him to become a significant part of that edge rush rotation. You know, what you're looking for is that year 2 leap that they always talk about. He got a decent amount of playing time as a rookie, about 30% of the defensive snaps. Finished with 1.5 sacks and 8 quarterback hits, so it wasn't a whole lot of statistical production, but there were some flashes. And if you're going to take that year 2 leap, you'd like to see him start camp quickly, and he looked quite good yesterday. He had several. You can't hit the quarterback. You're going to jail if you hit the quarterback, right? But there are some plays where it looked like he could have hit the quarterback if it wasn't for that rule. Coach Bowles, as he always does, was quick to say, hey, T-shirts and shorts, I won't necessarily put too much stock in it until they're in pads, and the offensive linemen really have an opportunity to fight back. But you do want to see that first step quickness, and that's what we saw from Chris Braswell, so that was encouraging.
Yeah, and I do feel like when you talk about that first to second year leap, that outside linebacker is actually one of the positions where I kind of expected the most in some ways in this defense, especially because they talk about how the way that Todd Bowles uses outside linebackers can be fairly different than the way a lot of them were used in college, and therefore it can be a bigger transition and leap that they have to make, especially how much they're asked to do sometimes even in coverage, and it's just an interesting dynamic for them of the ways they have to learn this playbook, and it's not just pin your ears back and go all the time. And so I do feel like I hear a lot of the guys talk about how important it was for them that year 1 to year 2 as an outside linebacker, just understanding what is asked of them, what Todd Bowles wants. And so I do feel like I'm excited to see now with a whole year under his belt what he looks like.
You're exactly right. And Coach Bowles was saying yesterday if there was a hurdle that Chris was trying to get over in his rookie season, it was the mental side of it. So you're exactly right.
So then I know also, of course, Mike Evans got the day off. Not all that surprising.
Why?
Yeah, I can't imagine. Not all that surprising.
Who greenlit that?
I know, yeah. He doesn't know what he's doing out here. He's got to be at training camp every day. So, yeah, he got the day off, which, of course, that means we get a chance to see some of these younger wide receivers step in, more reps for the younger guys that we do actually want to see a little bit more of wondering what they're going to be when we all know who Mike Evans is at this point. Tell me what we learned about some of the other guys.
Yeah, I first figured out that Mike wasn't practicing yesterday when I saw Trey Palmer making plays all over the place and on the field all the time with the first team. I'm like, what's going on? Why is there so much Trey Palmer? And then I realized Mike wasn't practicing, but he made a lot. I saw him make a bunch of splash plays, so that's good to see. And then Emeka Egbuka, the rookie, and this is not a surprising thing, but Baker Mayfield was saying afterwards, he's the resident guy this year, like Antoine Winfield Jr., where everybody says he's like a veteran already. He doesn't carry himself like a rookie. And Baker was talking about how they can, with Mike out, they can just put him in any position. He can play in the slot, he can play the X, he can play the Z. So I think he apparently showed up quite well yesterday as well.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. And then I know also we talked about some position battles we're going to be intrigued to watch, and slot corner is definitely one of them that is the most kind of up for grabs, I think, of a lot of the different defensive positions, frankly. And what did you see from that group in terms of who's getting certain reps and who made some big plays yesterday?
Yeah, we've got a lot of candidates for that position, which is great. And one of them may or may not be Tyke Smith, but what we've seen from him in the early part of camp is what we kind of expected. He's running first team next to Antoine Winfield as a pure safety. On day one, the guy that was getting most of the first team reps in the slot was Kendall Vildor, the guy we got from Detroit. And then yesterday on day two, it was the rookie Jacob Parrish getting a lot of first team snaps. They haven't done any team periods yet, so I don't know who's getting the call today, but it could be Christian Izian. They plan on cross-training Tyke Smith there, so it could be him. So it's good to see all that depth there. It's too early to say who's in the lead, but they're definitely trying out different options.
All right, well, we are going to take a quick break now that we've kind of recapped the day before, and now we're going to get into a little bit of today and what we're going to be looking at there as well. So we'll be right back with you here on Training Camp Report presented by Advent Health.
If we told the world 50 years ago that this is what Tampa Bay would become, they wouldn't have believed us. Imagine that. An unproven team in an unproven city, they couldn't see what we saw. The underdog in the unknown. But ever since the goalpost came down in '77, this town's been hooked. Fixed it on the work and focused on that prize. Times change, and boy, so is this place. I mean, even as the creamsicle and white turned to pewter and red, the wild spirit of our crew remains. Take a look at the last 5 decades, where the incredible has accomplished the impossible. Our greatest memories have the Bucs at the heart. We danced in the rain, man. We took the Lombardi for a ride, and year after year, the biggest party in Tampa happens right here. Because this team, these moments, they share one thing in common. They're made by Tampa Bay.
To Training Camp Report presented by Advent Health, and man, so fired up about all this 50th season content. Also, anything Brande does, that guy, he knows how to get you fired up. I see what he was like to play with on the field. Like, he knows how to narrate a story. He knows how to get you excited. So there's going to be a ton more 50th content coming up this season. It's going to be an absolute blast. For now, let's kind of dive back in a little bit to what we learned from yesterday. I know that we got to hear press conferences from several pretty important guys to this team, and one was Baker Mayfield. And I love how, yet again, just like what I said about Rondé, Baker knows how to say things that will fire you up as a Bucs fan. And I loved something that he said in his press conference yesterday, and I know it caught your eye too. So tell me what you heard from him.
You know, when I'm listening to press conferences, I'm often thinking, what am I going to write about after this press conference for the website, Buccaneers.com. And as soon as he said this, I'm like, well, there's my title. He said, elite is the standard. So he was basically being asked about the fact that outside perception of the Buccaneers as opposed to the last few years is pretty strong. You know, the Buccaneers were not favorites going into either of the last 2 seasons, and I think a lot of that had to do with there's a lot of members of the media out there who, look at what they've accomplished in the last 5 years. There's a lot of media out there that didn't necessarily believe in Baker Mayfield, and I'm not ripping on them. He'd had a couple years where he bounced around a little bit, right? But you know, he obviously has answered those questions, and now he's not a question mark anymore. He's a major part of why this team is considered to be very good. Now, when questioned about that, Baker points out it really has nothing to do with those outside perceptions, their motivation. Their motivation comes from within the building. And just like Levante David said after the first day of practice, which wasn't open to the public, Levante was asked, would you be back here today for your 14th season if you didn't think the Buccaneers could win the Super Bowl? And he said, no, probably not. So there's your overall team leader, your captain for the last dozen years, saying that, and he's on the defensive side. And then Baker Mayfield's basically saying the same thing. Everybody's talking about, can they win a 5th straight NFC South title, which would be a record. And of course that's a goal, but their standard, or their aim, is much higher than that.
Yeah, they know that's a step along the way that makes everything else a lot easier.
Yeah.
You know, that's a much more easy route to the playoffs and trying to get better home field advantage, all of that. But yeah, that's no longer the goal. They're not satisfied with that anymore.
We know what they want.
We know what they want.
Now, the other thing Baker said is that, almost in the same breath, is like, we want to be killers. And what he meant by that is they want to close teams out, and they want to close the race out if they are going to win the division, if they're in contention for it. We don't need another one of these seasons where there's a mid-season lull where you lose 4 or 5 or 5 or 6, and you have to fight and claw to the end and win, 6 of your last 7 games. If they are contending for the division title, which a lot of people think they will, they don't want to have to wait till the last weekend. They want to get it done, right? And then in games, sometimes, we weren't closing out our opponents until the last minute, and sometimes they didn't. You think of the Atlanta game, the 36-30 game on Thursday night, that really disappointing game that the Buccaneers were this close to putting away and then just didn't quite. And so Baker, I think for him, that next evolution is become killers in that situation.
And I think it's interesting that Baker said this, of course, after we have a new offensive coordinator this year, and after learning about Tristan Wirfs having a bit of an injury, that you can tell that these things don't make him think that we're going to be any less elite as a whole this season as a team.
It's just a challenge to overcome.
That it's just, like, hey, he shows you the faith he's got in Josh Grizzard. It shows you the faith he's got in his teammates and the depth and people stepping up. And I think that that's really cool to hear that, like, if this press conference had happened back in February maybe or something, it's a little different. But, like, to know now exactly where we are, that he is saying, yeah, this is the standard, this is who we are, this is what we believe in, I think is really exciting. And of course, as we discussed the fact that Tristan Wirfs is going to miss some time, heard from a very important person yesterday, that's Charlie Heck, a guy that, I just think all eyes are on him right now watching it at training camp, as he is the considered favorite to step in as the guy behind Tristan. Of course, you never know, there's a whole training camp that could happen here where things change, but as of right now, he's the guy. And so what did you learn from hearing from him, and as just Bucs fans get to know him as a new addition a little bit better?
The offensive line has always been that position on the team where they talk about how they need to be one unit and cohesive, and you generally have that kind of relationship and bond in that room. But it's been clear for the last couple of years that this unit is special in that regard. They are just so tight and so close. And Charlie Heck noticed that right away. And he's been on other teams, so it's not like Cody Mauch is asked about that, and he said, well, I've never been on another team, but I can't imagine it could be better than this. Charlie Heck has been on other teams, and still stood out to him what a cohesive group this was and how closely stuck together. And that translates onto the field. And he says he's been welcomed with open arms into that group. And so that can only help a player who's trying to step into such a big role, to have all that support and have the confidence of the guys around him. So, like you said, we're 6 weeks away from the regular season, and there's a lot of development to go. There's things that could happen, but that's also a lot of practice time for Charlie Heck to get cohesive with this new group. And that's different than Justin School stepping in for Luke Gedeke for about the same amount of time last year early in the season, because Luke got hurt and Justin had to step right in on the fly. Now Charlie has about 6 weeks to get ready, which is important.
Yeah, that's a huge deal. And now, of course, talked a lot of offensive guys there just now, but Todd Bowles was asked a little bit about the defensive side, and one of the guys I am really excited to see play in this camp and see who he potentially turns out to be is Benjamin Morrison. And Todd Bowles was asked about him, and the fact that he's coming off an injury makes him just a little bit more of an unknown quantity, I'm sure, especially to a lot of Bucs fans. But Todd Bowles seems to be pretty high on this guy.
Yeah, Benjamin only played like 6 games, I believe, in his final season at Notre Dame, and then had to shut it down to get hip surgery. But he had done enough in his first 2 seasons there to go into that 2024 season considered one of the best cornerbacks in the league. Now, that experience probably is the difference between him being drafted in the first and second round, and the Buccaneers could end up being the beneficiary of that overall because they were able to get a first-round talent in the second round. For Coach Bowles, the best part of what he saw from Benjamin in the first couple days was that he's just healthy. And Benjamin himself said he feels great, the best he's felt since he had that surgery. So that's good to hear. He's moving around fine. And, that was a bit of a question mark. Was he going to be ready for the start of camp? Is he going to be ready for the start of the regular season? And that seems to be progressing very well. Now, as we talked yesterday, amazingly, the Buccaneers suddenly have a pretty decent amount of cornerback depth, which is hard to find and develop. But what that means is a lot of competition for playing time. And most of the time, only 3 of those guys at most are going to be on the field at the same time. And when you have 4 or 5 guys that you think are candidates to start, that's quite a competition. And Benjamin says, of course I am competing to try to start right away. That's what you should do as a competitor. So that's his goal, to earn a starting job right off the bat. Will it happen? We'll see. But I think at least at some point he's going to have a very significant role in this defense.
All right, well, we are going to take another quick break here. And like we said, 50th season, there is a lot of content happening with it. And one of those just premiered last night. It is the I Am That Man Roundtable. So let's take a look at the trailer for that right now.
Being around great players makes you want to separate.
Well, these dudes count on me, so now I got to hold myself to a certain standard too as well.
It takes all 11. It takes 11 guys out there doing their job.
The biggest goal as a professional should be to win a championship, period.
I recognize the situation that I'm in and the people who are surrounding me, and I'm not just going to let that opportunity go by.
It's about carrying your responsibility and not letting your brothers down, right? That's football.
Football just brings us like a culture together.
In order to get to that level, you got to compete against the best. So I'm glad I'm here at the Buccaneers.
While you're living it, you don't realize you're making that history.
Welcome back into Training Camp Report presented by Evan Health. And yeah, that was the first episode just dropped last night, so you definitely need to check that out.
I haven't seen it yet. That looked really cool.
Yeah.
Among all the big names in there, one I really enjoyed seeing was Tony Mayberry.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we've done a whole lot with him through the years, but he definitely fits into that category. 4th-round draft pick who started for a decade at center and went to 3 Pro Bowls.
It's incredible. I think it's going to be a really fun video series, so make sure you're following along with all of that, especially on the Buccaneers YouTube and places there. And I know we also saw Benjamin Morrison taking part. That we had a few of the rookies there of kind of bridging that gap of showing what that I am that man philosophy has meant throughout the years at the Buccaneers here. So now let's take a look in our last segment here about a couple more position battles that we're going to be watching. And I know that we give a lot of attention to the offensive and defensive kind of starting roles and their immediate backups, which makes a lot of sense. But the special teams position battles can almost be one of the most important parts of training camp in solidifying who actually gets on this roster. And I think in recent years, especially the return game has been something that they've been striving to find some big plays in and some, impact guys in the return game. So let's talk a bit about punt returners and who you see potentially winning this battle and how they might be using different guys here and what this could mean for who makes the roster.
There's a lot of candidates, I'll tell you that. And, how the roster is constructed will have a lot to do with who finally gets that job, and vice versa. Who getting that job could affect how the roster is constructed. And I start with Trey Palmer. I think you have to, because he's the incumbent. He handled that job all of last year, and we've seen enough of him to feel good about him in terms of the very first most important part of returning punts is catching the ball, retaining possession. You can't let that ball go through your hands. It just can't happen. It can be a game changer. You can lose a game if that happens one time. So they obviously will have confidence in Trey. He averaged 8.0 yards per punt return. Like you said, didn't yet. I'm not saying he's not capable of it, but we haven't yet found the big splash plays, 1 or 2 or 3 of those a season. But, like I said, they have to be confident in him, and him retaining that job would also be a big part of him retaining a spot on the active roster, because there's a lot of competition at wide receiver as well. You also have a couple rookies, draft picks, in Emeka, Egbuka, and Tez Johnson, who had experience in that in college. And when they were drafted, it was mentioned they could be candidates to help out in that regard. Tez had a little bit more. He had 56 punt returns in college, 9.3 yards per attempt, and did have a punt return touchdown. Emeka did some in college and also did some kickoff return. Not a ton, but some. And he's been very much in the rotation when they've been doing it. So I don't know, maybe sometimes you're a little hesitant to put your first-round draft pick back there.
That's what I was just going to ask. And especially I was going to see if you thought, depending on how much, if any, time Chris Godwin misses, does that make it less likely even Emeka
think
is back
so.
there. So is it almost like there's the, well, what's happening with Chris, and then does that mean him? And so there's a lot of potential factors in
sure.
to this, other than just who you think could be best at this job even.
Absolutely. And one guy I didn't write down, but I should mention, is Cam Johnson, because I saw him heavily involved in the rotation as well. So we remember him, looked so great in camp last year, dealt with injuries early on in the regular season, so he didn't get a whole lot of opportunity to play, but was a guy they were really excited about a year ago at this time.
And then finally, we wanted to talk a little bit about the off-ball linebacker position. I mean, spoiler alert, Levante, pretty good at football, probably going to retain his job. So the guy next to him is going to be a really interesting one to see. They brought in some new people. We got people back from injury. And, you know, this is a spot that I think has been where there hasn't been as much experienced depth in the past as well. And so now it feels like whoever wins this battle, there just is a little bit more depth at this spot than maybe we've had in recent years. And, you know, we lost KJ Britt in free agency, and then now Servassier Dennis is back healthy. You bring in Anthony Walker. What do you see as what they're going to prioritize when it comes to either pass game, run game, the size, the speed of the type of guy that you think is going to be taking on this role?
Well, first of all, good job by our guys out there in the field, because while you were talking, we saw a bit of action from two of the three guys I'm going to be talking about right here, Servassier Dennis and Dennis Jones. It's less of a, I would characterize it as less of a competition or a camp battle. And that's especially true right now because Anthony Walker, the free agent that they signed, who has a ton of experience, like 75 career starts, and is really good in pass coverage, which is something they were trying to address in the middle part of our defense. He's on PUP right now, and Coach Bowles described him yesterday as being week to week. Hopefully that means he's back at some point during camp and the preseason. But obviously, if there was going to be a battle between him and Servassier for that main job next to Levante, that's not going on right now. And even then, I'm not sure if I would call it a battle so much as figuring out how to use all of these guys, because I think once Anthony is healthy and back on the field, that the goal will be to find ways to utilize both him and Servassier. Servassier has a ton of buzz coming into this camp after, you know, he's healthy again. That's the only thing that's held him back the last couple of years, and I think they're very excited about what he can do. So I think that's probably option 1A right now. Another guy to keep in mind, though, in terms of what you're talking about of experience depth, is Deion Jones, and he's after Levante, he's the most experienced guy out there. Really had a nice long career mostly in Atlanta, and showed last year in just a little bit of action for us that he's still got some juice. And I think the team really likes him a lot. And I don't know, even if he doesn't carve out some role on defense at the beginning of the season, it's nice to know that he's there with that experienced depth. So I think the Bucs are happy that they got him late last year and saw enough that they wanted to bring him back this year.
All right, well, that's going to do it for us on this edition of Training Camp Report presented by Advent Health. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, as we've talked about, they get 3 days on, then they need to get a day off. So tomorrow they will be off. We'll be back here Sunday morning, which is actually the Back Together weekend. NFL Network's going to be out here. It's going to be a big party, especially our first weekend practice where more people have the chance to come out. So make sure if you're not actually out here at camp, you're back here with us Sunday morning, and we'll see you then.